When you think of dessert, you probably conjure up something like a decadent brownie or ice cream or both. You know, something sweet, rich, and decadent. But if you're like me and don't have much of a sweet tooth, sometimes you feel like there aren't many options. Luckily, there is a luxurious, creamy solution to this problem that just so happens to include coffee. This is homemade tiramisu. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode here at Time Out Kitchen, where today, to celebrate my birthday, I'll be taking myself on a journey to make some tiramisu from scratch, which I'll regret later, but we will get to that in a moment. The reason I'm a fan of tiramisu is for its creamy texture, its light sweetness, and subtle coffee flavor that makes a great dessert, but also unsurprisingly goes very well with your morning, afternoon, or late night coffee, depending on your level of caffeine addiction. Speaking of which, make sure you've brewed a fresh batch of coffee before getting into this recipe. At least 2 to 3 cups worth should do. So with that, let's get into it. And to start, we're going to make our ladyfingers. To do that, you'll need about 5 eggs, which we will separate the yolks and the whites from. Now, our aim here is to whip our egg whites and fold them into a batter that uses our egg yolks. So it's pretty important to keep this as clean as possible and not have any yolk mix in with the whites or vice versa, as this can really mess up our final product. Once separated, just move the bowl of the egg whites to the side so we can tackle our egg yolks first, which means you'll need the mixing bowl from your stand mixer, so grab that and then drop in your 5 egg yolks, followed by a cup of granulated sugar and around 1 to 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. With everything in the bowl, we're going to thoroughly combine everything in our stand mixer, so set it to low until everything is loosely combined before we're bumping it up to a higher setting for around 60 seconds or until homogeneous. After about 45 to 60 seconds of mixing, our batter should be combined, so you'll want to transfer all of this into another bowl so that we can clean and reuse the stand mixer bowl for our egg whites. And just to be clear, the first half of the batter should have a light yellowish color and be light and airy. Moving along, grab your now clean stand mixer bowl and dump in your 5 eggs worth of egg whites, and then drag this back to the stand mixer. Lock the bowl in place and set this to a high setting. While this is going, slowly pour in about 1/2 cup of sugar, and don't dump this all in at once, as gradually adding in the tiny granules is what's going to allow us to create a nice, airy, and rather sticky mixture. And to be clear, what you're looking for here is going to be stiff peaks, meaning that this holds firm on its own volition. With our stiff peaks achieved, we're going to combine this with our first mixture of egg yolks, sugar, and vanilla. So just grab that bowl, then grab the egg white mixture and drop that in. Now here is where you will want to gently fold everything together. This means not squishing this down or mixing too vigorously, as you will remove the air we whipped into our batter. So do your best to gently fold this all together while keeping all of that air intact. Basically, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. Now, to make this a proper batter, we're definitely going to need some flour, and specifically I'll be using 1 cup of cake flour. You can of course use all-purpose flour, but you will definitely get a much lighter and finer consistency out of the cake flour, so definitely use it if you have it. Regardless of which flour you have on hand, just make sure that you run it through a fine mesh sieve just to remove any clumps. Then combine this by gently folding once again, and your batter is ready for the next step. However, this stage is an important decision for the newbie baker or home cook, as even with my lack of experience, I get the distinct impression that this batter is far too liquidy. So the decision is to either add more flour until satisfied, or continue to hope things will turn out just fine. Remember those regrets I mentioned at the beginning of this video? Well, this exact moment is where they started, as I foolishly decided to press onward with my endeavor. So ignoring our better judgment or gut instincts, grab a piping bag or Ziploc bag and drop in your rather runny ladyfinger batter. I'd recommend putting this bag in a tall cup or vessel just to help hold everything upright and avoid making a mess. Once all the batter is in the bag, then just gently push this batter to a corner, and this is basically ready for piping. To pipe out the ladyfingers, I recommend a baking tray with a silicone sheet, as it just makes things a lot easier, but you could also use parchment paper to ensure that these things don't stick. With that in place, grab your batter and find the corner that you're going to cut, and well, cut it off and then descend into the depths of despair as pretty much everything starts to go wrong. You can see we struggle to cut the bag, our batter is leaking everywhere, and our piping skills leave more than something to be desired. So I'd say we're off to a pretty bad start. But I don't know what I'm doing, and I figure we've already come this far, so let's just sprinkle on some powdered sugar, toss these into an oven for about 10 minutes at 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and see what happens. And after about 12 minutes, what happens is exactly what we thought, which is nothing. These things are flatter than Hank Hill's ass.
You have no ass.
And totally unsalvageable for our purposes. A pretty embarrassing final product for someone aspiring to create a cooking show, but I suppose they might make a nice accompaniment to coffee later on, so we'll save these and try again. So in this iteration, I'm going to change a few key things. First, we're going to be more organized. I made sure to measure out and prepare all the ingredients in advance. So our flour is sifted, our eggs are separated, and our sugar is poured, and I even found a piping tip to provide us with an air of baking expertise, which we clearly do not have. But ultimately what really went wrong in our first attempt was that our ladyfinger dough was way too runny. So to fix that, I'm going to up the ratio of the cake flour to about 1/4 cup per egg yolk. When it comes to sugar, I'll be using about 1/8 of a cup of sugar per egg white. So in total, that's about 1 1/4 cup of flour and just under 2/3 of a cup of sugar. Next, to keep as much structure and air in these whipped eggs, I'm going to keep the movement of cameras and lights to a minimum. This will help speed things up and also maximize the air in our batter, so prepare for some relatively static footage. Basically, I'm trying to do everything I can to make this more efficient, and if this doesn't work, we're going to the store and buying some pre-made ladyfingers. Anyways, off to our stand mixer we go, where we will once again drop our egg whites in, set this to high, and slowly pour in our 2/3 cup of sugar. Then just let this run until we've reached a state of stiff peakiness. With stiff peaks achieved, I'm taking on another time-saving move by dropping in the egg yolks directly to our egg whites and folding these in gently. Once again, doing my best to keep as much air in these as possible. Once well combined, it's time to drop in 1 to 2 teaspoons of vanilla, followed by 1 1/4 cup of finely sieved cake flour. And please don't skip the fine mesh sieve when you're making this, it really does help avoid clumps. Anyways, with the flour added, continue to gently fold everything until homogeneous. Now with everything mixed, my friends, this actually looks like a proper batter and not a runny mess. But time is of the essence, so quickly transfer this to your Ziploc bag, which now includes a piping tip, and gently push everything towards said piping tip, and we're now ready to try to make these ladyfingers once again. So grab your silicone covered cookie sheet, make a quick prayer to the baking gods that your resilience has paid off, and well, get piping. And honestly, despite the lack of baking skills and piping skills and really not having a smooth shaped piping tip, these things are holding up and actually look like a proper ladyfinger. So I'm going to just keep going until I've run out of batter. And don't worry if these things aren't perfectly even, as they will be hidden in our layers of tiramisu, but that said, just do the best you can. Once all your ladyfingers are laid out, it's time to give them a light dusting of our powdered sugar and then toss these into your 375 degree preheated oven for about 10 minutes or until lightly golden brown. With the ladyfingers now in the oven, this is a perfect time to move on to our coffee syrup. Again, make sure you've made a strong, freshly brewed and chilled batch of coffee. So in a large bowl, drop in 1 tablespoon of sugar and pour in around 1.5 to 2 cups of your chilled coffee. Then just simply whisk this to combine everything and then just leave this off to the side so we can move on to the cream portion of our tiramisu. To make that cream, grab a large bowl and drop in 2 cups or about 450 grams of mascarpone cheese. Then just give this a quick mix to make everything smooth before adding in 1 teaspoon of vanilla and then combining thoroughly. The cheese and vanilla should look velvety and smooth like this. At this stage, we're going to make the cream component of our tiramisu by, very unsurprisingly, grabbing some cream. In this case, 475 mils of heavy whipping cream will go into our stand mixer bowl, which I must say is getting quite the workout today, along with 1 to 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Then bring this simple mixture over to the stand mixer with your whisk attachment and start at a low setting before gradually moving to high and letting this go for about 2 to 3 minutes or until you've got yourself some beautiful looking whipped cream. Now at this point you can probably guess the next step, which is to combine our light, airy whipped cream with our more dense mascarpone cheese. And yes, you've correctly assumed that we will gently fold this together to keep the cream mixture as light and fluffy as possible. After a little bit of mixing and with everything thoroughly combined, the cream is now ready, so it's time to check in on our ladyfingers. So it's been about 12 minutes, and folks, I gotta say, I think we did it. Despite not having that traditional smooth shape, these definitely look like a proper ladyfinger. These actually smell amazing, and you can see that the tops are lightly golden brown and the bottoms have a nice golden color to them. So overall, these are totally unrecognizable in the best possible way when compared to our earlier version. But there's no time to get giddy because we're finally going to put all this stuff together. So move these off to the side and grab your tin. I'm using a 9x9 tin, but you can use a glass Tupperware or something with some high sides to it, as we want to make several layers. Now to make these layers, we're going to make this similar to a lasagna, which means I'll be smoothing out a thin layer of our cream in the bottom of our tin, which will help prevent our ladyfingers from sliding around. And speaking of those ladyfingers, they will make up our next layer, but crucially, we need to dip these into that coffee syrup we made earlier. So bring over the bowl of coffee and begin soaking your ladyfingers in said coffee. I'm only soaking these for around 2 seconds or so, but honestly, I could have put these in for longer as I really do like that coffee flavor. Hell, I could have even dunked these completely in the coffee if I wanted to, but preferences aside, just keep soaking these until you're happy with the result and line them up side by side. If they don't quite fit, don't worry, just break off a piece or add a piece from another ladyfinger. Once that layer is filled, just add another layer of your cream, trying your best to make sure that the cream gets into every crack and crevice, and then of course doing your best to make that nice and even and smooth. Then you're just going to repeat this process over and over again until you run out of ingredients or space in your container. After some painstaking work, you'll finally reach the top layer, and at this point you have some options. You could make some fancy designs, use a piping tip or some sort of stencil, but at this point in our journey, I'm not looking to complicate things any further, so I'll just be flattening out this top layer as best as I can. Because this is where the final touch comes in, the iconic dusting of some cocoa powder to top it off. This is really the final touch and iconic, which of course means I only captured a few seconds of it since my battery died during this step. But non-cooperative technology aside, your tiramisu should look something a little bit like this. And if you've done a good job smoothing everything out, you should have a tiramisu without any of these little white specks of cream poking out, but you can always cover those up a little bit later. So with that done, this should go into the fridge for a few hours to let that coffee penetrate into the ladyfingers and basically just have these flavors combine and mellow out. But I can't leave here without showing you the final product, so I'm going to break the rules and cut into this after only about 30 minutes or so, and yeah, I don't recommend that you do this if you want truly tasty tiramisu. But it's my birthday, so we're going to break the rules just a little bit. In any case, grab yourself a plate and then drop down a slice of slightly premature tiramisu. And honestly, this looks as good as I could ask given some of the challenges that we went through. The layers are clearly defined, the coffee has permeated our ladyfingers, and the cream is light and velvety. But the real question is, how's this all taste? And the answer is really good. The cream is light yet rich with a mild sweetness that pairs so nicely with the mellow coffee flavor that permeates through the ladyfingers. This thing definitely reminds me of every good tiramisu that I've ever had. But from a texture standpoint, the ladyfingers definitely need a bit more time soaking in the coffee and hanging out in the fridge, but they definitely have that right flavor profile. Now that you're seeing the final product, you might be thinking that there's something missing to go along with this sweet treat, and you're definitely right. There is one thing missing, and that is some delicious iced coffee. So pour yourself a glass and enjoy this very iconic pairing. And there you go, guys, a dang tasty tiramisu recipe that in my opinion is well worth the effort and can be tackled by even the most novice of bakers. So if you don't have a really big sweet tooth or you enjoy a coffee flavored dessert, guys, I really hope that you give this a shot. With that said, thank you so much for watching until the end of this video. As always, thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. We will see you in the next one.